As you know, Idle Thumbs is supported by many great sponsors that whose products we have actually used ourselves and that we appreciate. So to help us continue to get ads that for products and services that are actually relevant and useful to us and our listeners, if you could fill out the mid-roll audience survey, it would be very helpful. Go to podsurvey.com/thumbs. You will have a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. That is podsurvey.com/thumbs.
It's June 17th, 2015.
This is Idle Thumbs 215, I'm pretty sure.
Sure.
I'm Chris Ramo.
And I'm Nick Brecken.
And that's it.
That's all we got.
If you are a new listener to Idle Thumbs by any chance, this is going to be a weird week for you. This is not representative of what this cast usually is. It generally has
or
between
ever
3 and 5 people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this the only cast of 2? Oh, I feel like
our intern Gabe is shaking his head. What is the other one, Gabe?
I don't know. I can find out, but that is
I like this
podcast.
I like this Howard Stern setup we've gone to now that we're down to like 2 people. Just start shouting to people like in the far background.
Yeah.
Jane, what do you got for us? What's the weather like?
We've done at least one other one with only 2 people. It was probably Jake and me.
Yeah,
I would guess.
Yeah.
Gabe is nodding his head yes.
Sounds right, boss.
So anyway, this is an unusual episode, but we're the only ones left. Every single other Idle Thumbs co-host is at E3 right now.
Everyone's attending this E3. It was a big E3 this year, apparently. A lot of
Gabe is shaking his head.
Correction. Danielle's in New York.
Danielle is in New York, but she's
true.
covering E3, so
she's spiritually attending E3.
I'm gonna go with that. So so speaking of E3, Bethesda had their press conference and they announced Fallout 4, but they also announced Fallout Shelter, which is an iOS game that came out immediately upon announcement for iPhone and iPad, and that is actually the thing that I want to talk about the most because I've been playing it.
This is true.
Which I have a lot to say about this game, actually.
You want to take a break?
After
this long podcast?
I mean, I'm fine to discuss Fallout Shelter.
Go for it.
And the first thing I want to say about it that is not really relevant, but just in the world we live in now that is so permeated by brands and franchises, and it is so, I see the phrase Fallout Shelter, and my brain has a war with itself over whether I should say Fallout Shelter, as though shelter is
right.
like the subtitle or the fall. Like these days now everything's not. Now subtitles are out of favor, and now we're in the just append a word with no colon or dash or anything, but just like whatever rising or whatever ascension or what. So this is like Fallout Shelter.
Yeah.
But no, it's an actual phrase. It's a real reference to a real thing that exists in life and in the Fallout universe, which is a fallout shelter.
Yes.
Where shelter is the actual noun and Fallout just describes what kind of shelter it's for.
Right.
And so when I see the name of this game, because the word Fallout is styled in, it's the Fallout logo type, with the little lightning bolt and the O. Mm-hmm. And so I have this like terrible thing where my brain wants to preserve the sanctity of the brand, but then the other part of my brain is like, fuck you, it's just words.
You want that colon in front of like Fallout
It's the English
New Vegas.
language.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like I shouldn't like be subservient to this like brand instinct I have. It's Fallout Shelter. Mm-hmm. It's a Fallout Shelter.
Nope.
No, it's not. It's Fallout Shelter.
Tuna fish. You're just eventually everything in your life will just become,
exactly.
destroyed by video game branding.
Yep.
Or at least this week.
Yeah, definitely this fucking week. But anyway, so that aside, that has really nothing to do with the game itself. I have played a lot of this game, which is saying something because it came out 36 hours ago.
True.
Basically.
Yeah.
At the time we're recording this podcast, which is yesterday from when you are listening to it.
Yeah. So you're hooked.
I am hooked. I'm hooked, and it's
a free-to-play game.
It is free to play. Yes, it is.
I was surprised by that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. It just seemed like a promotional app, and usually promotional apps are just free to play.
You mean just
exclusively,
free,
as in like there's no
play,
monetization aspect
not
to it.
Free to play,
free
but
to play, just free. Right? Yeah. Free : to play.
Yeah. Speaking of our shitty marketing infused reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that the game feels to me totally playable, actually, without spending any money, except that, and this is the experience I've had, and I don't know, you haven't played it enough probably to speak to these subtleties, right? I'm guessing.
No.
Yeah.
No.
This game basically functions perfectly without spending any additional money. And in other words, it feels like it's tuned pretty well to give you, to sort of space things out. And I'm sorry, I should explain what this is. So This is a game that actually the closest comparison to what it looks like would be to what it looks like and plays like is like, imagine something like SimTower, a 2D kind of builder that is vertically oriented, except it's like the XCOM.
I was gonna say like the XCOM base.
It's like the XCOM base, and that it's underground and goes downward, and it also looks like it. It just visually, with the exception of the characters, which are really nicely animated 2D sprites, everything just looks
Fallout,
like XCOM,
like Fallout Boy.
They look like
caricature.
Fallout Boy character, exactly. Yeah. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful both in its combination of kind of simple 3D and nice texture work and 2D sprites, and also totally appropriate to a phone because it's a very simple 2D layout, and it's like you pretty much just expand downward and drag people around, and it's a builder game with a very simple kind of work-life simulation where the little Fallout dwellers, as they're called, the shelter dwellers, will walk around and you can assign them to rooms like power generator and water purifier and restaurant and like various kinds of science and medical bays, and increasingly you get other things like weight training rooms and stuff that allow people to improve their stats. And you have to, as is the case in these games, you have to balance their happiness and their health and invading raiders and like crazy radiated bugs that will pop out of the ground and fires and all kinds of things. And you have money that you earn, and you just have to balance. It's not an incredibly complex simulation, but it's got the sort of like precarious balance kind of thing at times. There are other times where things just progress, and this is and without really much friction, and everyone is happy and everyone's doing their work. And when raiders invade or fire breaks out, you deal with it pretty quickly, and things continue. And I've noticed that for me anyway, I don't know if this is the same for anyone else. For me, there's a pretty consistent correlation between being in the game in real time and things going well. And the game feels like it's designed to allow you to like go in, check on your stuff, leave. But I find that when I go to sleep, for example, which is a time I think I can't really avoid doing in my life. Yeah. When I wake up in the morning, it's like, holy shit. Everything is like, everything is an extreme version of what it was before. Like good things are way better. Bad things are way worse. Like I have to click through a million, like here are all the things that happened like before you went to sleep. And like I woke up this morning and there were fucking bugs and everyone had radiation poisoning, from the bugs, I guess. And I mean, it was just a nightmare. Like 90% of my base was dead. By the end of this, I don't think they can die when you're actually not in the app, but it's possible to come back to a situation that is bad enough that then they're just going to end up dying. And I didn't have enough people equipped with weapons and stuff, so I just got wiped out. It was a massacre, and that was when I bought 2 packs of lunch boxes, which you can buy, and they give you money and goods and things, and I could have spent like $20 for the pack of 40 lunch boxes. I wasn't really willing to do that. It was sort of a combination of buying a couple of these things and then digging myself out the rest of the way, which was like intermittent check-ins for like pretty much all of today, of like slowly inching my way back to like, you can spend money to revive people. So like every bit of money I got basically went back into bringing everyone slowly back to life and like digging all my power and water and food out of the red. And like, oh my God, it was grueling. And like, if this happens again tonight, I'm done. Like if this happens, that's it. It did happen again. This is Chris recording the following day. So after twice in a row, all my resources being depleted overnight, everyone on my base being miserable and unhealthy and diseased and hungry, I brought this up on Twitter, and it seems that this is actually an issue that is affecting some people with the game. The game is actually supposed to stop depleting your resources a certain amount of time after you close the app. And for some people, this works fine. And for other people, it doesn't work unless you actually force quit the app, like not just quit back to your home screen, but actually double tap the home button and dismiss the app to just kill it entirely. So if you have this problem where it seems like once you're away from your base for more than about 10 minutes, it starts just, your resources just start completely going down the toilet. Make sure that if you're done with the game for a while, make sure to just completely quit out of it, because otherwise you will be sad. All right, back to the podcast.
That cut out to be a Fallout shelter dweller.
Overlord.
Overlord.
Yeah. Okay. So that's that thing. And maybe I will say that my base is much more mature now. I have a lot more weapons and armor equipped. So hopefully this kind of thing is less likely to happen. There is a more fundamental disturbing thing about this game that you, depending on your sort of inclination and what you see, there are a lot of debates right now going on about whether games should reflect the world that we have or the world that we want or some combination of the two. And then on top of that, it's always been a very complicated thing to try and model behavior or systems in games in a way that captures any of the complexity of actual human societies and life. Like stuff gets very abstracted.
Yeah.
Boy, that's true in this game. And how could it not be? Because it's a little tiny simulation on your telephone. This is an iOS game, by the way. I don't think we ever said that. On your fucking telephone. So there is one odd thing about this game, which is that, about the premise of the game, I should say, within the context of the Fallout universe, which is that initially, the way you get more vault dwellers is they just come to your vault and you let them in. Which seems weird in the context of the Fallout universe, but maybe that's how things work?
No, traditionally it's that, they all went down into their own vaults.
Right.
And
but
then
this
eventually
game starts after the post-apocalyptic, after the apocalyptic event. And
so you're essentially creating a vault that is still, like, retained its whatever. It's cut off from the world and people are sort of, like, discovering
you're basically building a new one, essentially.
Right, okay, yeah,
you know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like an odd premise for Fallout. Whatever. So that I'm just establishing so I can get past it and talk about the like more significant thing that I want to talk about. I feel if there were a way to eliminate that step and just start with a base full of enough people to be self-sufficient, the game would sell itself in the bleak way that it actually ends up selling itself. So after you are no longer relying on newcomers visiting you from the vault, the main way that you attempt to grow your population is through procreation, is through people having babies. And so I realized when I was playing the game for a while, I'm like, man, there are way more women in my vault than men. Like, I wonder if that's just like a random number generator fluke, if that's intentional, if it's not, like if it's just what my game happens to be. And you realize, like, pretty quickly that must be a deliberate game design choice because only women can get pregnant, but men can have as many babies as they want. And you realize, like, past a point that, like, once a woman gets pregnant in the game, like, you put people, you drag everyone where you want them to go. So you can put people in residential areas. And if you have a man and a woman in a residential area, especially if one or both of them has high charisma, they will like start to get to know each other and you can see them like talking to each other and being flirty. And then eventually they will like go, classic Sims fashion, like go behind like a curtain basically, go into another little back room.
Curtain or whatever,
and then,
whatever they call it in
and
the
then
game.
they'll come out and the woman is pregnant and the man is not, obviously.
Yeah.
And then you can put them both back to work, and it doesn't affect their like jobs, like
Right.
they're equally as capable as they were before, except that the woman can't get pregnant again until she has her baby, which means you can put that same guy right back in the residence, drag a different non-pregnant woman in there.
It's for the species, Chris.
No, I know, but that's what I mean about the bleakness of this game.
Right.
Is that
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's like it or not,
It is strangelove.
This is why I bring up the thing about sort of ongoing arguments about whether games should reflect, like, I mean, this doesn't reflect anything because this isn't actually a real thing that exists, right? But like, just in this hypothetical situation in which you have like a limited number of people trapped in a thing, and you are trying to increase their numbers over a long period of time, like, this is a pretty in the roughest, crudest possible terms, that's a fairly like plausible version of that reality. But it feels really gross to do it. You know what I mean? Like, it feels gross to be complicit in it, but you just keep doing it. And at a certain point,
well, and inevitably the tone of the game isn't matching that feeling, right? Because it's not predicting that this is like a.
I don't know.
Or is it? I don't know.
I don't really know. I mean, it's not in the sense that everybody is equally happy to do any job you give them,
right? Which
includes have babies. But they're equally happy to work in a restaurant or do anything else, right? Like, people have happiness, but I don't think. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but as far as I can tell, their happiness is not affected by like whether they have job A or job B or anything else. It's affected by like, are they healthy? Do they have their needs met? Are they injured? Like, whatever. It's affected by those things. So in that sense, yes, it is not realistic in that people are not interchangeable. And that is, like, they do have all different like skin tones and hair color and so on. You can give them different clothes and so on. But yes, the game essentially trains you to view these people as workers and baby makers in a really, in a very utilitarian way. And my game hit sort of the apotheosis of this sort of when I first kind of figured out this cycle, I'm like, okay, I need to be having these babies, so eventually my population will grow. I got into it. This is where I got into the game has a thing where you can rush production in a given room, and there is a percentage chance that doing so, meaning you don't have to wait, 3 minutes or whatever for it to finish creating power or whatever. You can rush it, and it'll do it in like 5 seconds, but there's a certain percentage chance that a catastrophe will happen. And I remember I didn't quite understand that system, because one of the problems I often have on iOS games is I'll be tapping for some intentional reason because I'm doing something, and then a tutorial thing will come up right as I was about to tap something, and I will dismiss it instantly on accident because I didn't know it was about to come up, and that was right when my thumb is hitting the screen. This happens to me all the time in mobile games. Yeah. And so I didn't really understand. I just didn't think about the rushing thing, and I rushed a bunch of rooms, and then just fucking catastrophes occurred. And my people were in terrible shape, and everyone was really unhappy. And I was like but I was also like mid kind of breeding frenzy. And when people are unhappy, whether they're happy or unhappy, they walk around and they spout just like little sentence long. If you zoom in on them, you can see this little, they're like, sure do.
Yeah. Like theme park.
Enjoy my day today. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Or like, boy, I'm really bad. And, I mean, with Fallout-y kind of flavor. And I realized, I looked in my residential places, and I had all these people wearing like nighttime wear. Like, you can give people clothes that affect their stats, right? That make them like more intelligent or more agile or whatever. And one of the things you can do is you can give them pajamas, PJs? And that raises their charisma. Okay. Yes, exactly. And right. And so, like every time I put two people in the residence to try and to have them make some magic together, I always put them in pajamas first, right? And so the combination of all these factors meant that for a pretty long, depressing time in my game, while everyone was like irradiated and sick and unhappy and having sex all the time, they were sitting there and they were wearing like skimpy like pajamas, like the women in, women's undergarments and the men in like pajama style thing, just wearing that stuff.
Yeah.
They're sitting there and they're saying things like, I just can't imagine myself without you. And like, oh, you make me so happy. Meanwhile, they have these big frowns on their faces.
Yeah.
They look miserable.
Yeah.
They are like physically diseased. And like, and then they're like dancing with each other, which is what happens before they go into the back room. Like they progress from like talking to dancing to back room. And so you have these people going through the terrible motions of being just sick and miserable and yet forcing themselves to make pillow talk and engage in overseer mandated flirtation and procreation. And it was just the bleakest, most depressing shit. It was unbelievable. And I'm like, this is actually really impressive as an achievement. That's like what this game is doing to me right now is terrible, because you then it sort of feeds back and you're like, oh my God, how many hours in the last day have I put into this fucking thing? I'm these people too.
I was just going to say, it kind of reminds me of just the experience of working at a game development studio. Like the whole cycle of just, ending up in your underwear at 4 a.m. and then forcing yourself to enjoy a fraction of your life, like for an hour, like dancing. Yeah, I'm happy.
Yep.
No, just
guys,
back to work.
Back to work again, guys. Aren't you all excited?
Yeah,
5th night in a row.
Yeah,
from our favorite place.
Yep.
Yeah, it was it's been an interesting. It's been and I'm not saying this to condemn the game.
No, it makes me want to play it now.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, a lot of the rest of the time is like just doing kind of fairly emotionally neutral, like management and matching stats with the appropriate actions and, things you do in management games. The person who's better at this thing, you put him in that room, and the person who's better at this thing, you put her in that room, and so on.
Yeah.
But the overall, like, this like through line is pretty distressing in a way that when everything hit that like point was very, hit me hard.
I mean, it feels reflective. I mean, it's certainly at an extreme point of this, but it feels reflective of the sort of, property itself.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's what Fallout to me has sort of typified is the like kind of casually like bright and cheery thing that if you think about it for 5 seconds is actually the darkest, most depressing.
Oh yeah. Well, because Fallout is, and that part has never really been. That is always on the edges of the actual Fallout games. Yeah. But that's never really what you as the player do.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's typified in all the fictional marketing materials for Vault-Tec.
Exactly.
Is this like, because that in itself is like, is appropriating, that vision of the 50s themselves, which is, like corporations essentially selling you an image of a perfect American life that you will then constantly strive consumeristically to uphold. And then the Fallout games basically say, like, what if this were enshrined in, in this like time capsule, basically.
Well, and the Overseer, who I guess you're playing as in this game, is always a villain character in games, right? I mean, like the Overseer is just the gross guy that you have to overthrow at the beginning of the game and escape. And so in a weird way, it almost sounds like they made the game that forces you to roleplay as that guy, which is, it's weird and cool, I guess. It's really interesting.
It is interesting. One of the things I remember from the old Fallout games, and I actually can't remember at this point if this was in the games themselves or if it was in the manual to like Fallout 1 or 2.
The manual has the Overseer little notes with the taped. He's like marked up the whole manual.
Right. What I'm thinking of though is the list of all the different vault numbers and what they were. A lot of them were like weird sociological experiment. It was like
Stanford
Vault 17, like Stanford Prison Experiment 1, and like Vault 75, like only men, like Vault 95, like sheep introduced into population. I mean, that one's made up, but it was all shit like that. And like there was a list of like tons of different vault numbers and all the crazy things that were and playing this, I wasn't deliberately playing with a goal in mind, but then as I got to these like weird points of self-awareness, I realized that my vault, you could just put it into that, right. you could just put it into that list somewhere with like a,
weird MeUndies dancing party.
Right, exactly, right? Like scheduled forced procreation. Exactly. Like that's the tagline for my thing. And man, it ended up being gross because after I got through that big cycle, every single woman in my vault was pregnant.
Oh my God.
Every single one of them. It made me feel like a fucking monster. Cause like in the moment I was just dragging people around, and then it wasn't until I realized like there's nothing for me to do right now. Like all my rooms are staffed.
Right.
And then I zoomed out.
Well, that is the overseer's life. I mean, he's dragging people around, just looking at the screens.
I know, but when everything was like as optimized as it was going to get for at least the next hour or whatever.
Yeah.
You
sit down, you have a scotch,
and I'm
cry,
like, oh my God, like what a fucked up thing this is. Like every single woman who exists in this closed universe is pregnant right now, and it actually takes about a day, as far as I can tell, to bring a child to term.
Yeah.
And so that was the case for a long time until overnight. And then when I woke up the next morning, there were like 20 new baby notifications.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I had to get through all of them. And then on top of all that, that's when everything was going to hell. So all these children were born into this like terrible world where all their parents were dying and living as corpses on the ground for like 12 hours until I got enough money to revive them.
It makes you wonder how many like notorious dictators really just enjoyed management. As a weird, you know what I mean, like problem to solve.
I mean, it's a pretty good example of
interesting.
Like good intentions paving the way to hell.
Yeah.
Like it's really difficult to just like
one day you wake up and just a gross thing is happening.
Yeah,
but you got there via like a million rush orders.
And it also really just reminded me of how hard it is in a game to make a simple system that doesn't say something very powerful that you did not intend. You know what I mean? And I don't know what they intended in this game or not, so I can't speak to that. But I can say that having worked on a game like this, with Space DF9 at Double Fine, I mainly worked on the prototype version, but it had the same things happen. Whereas like you put in a system, and systems will kind of fall into like patterns, and players will fall into shortest point from A to B, and it's really, really, really difficult to design out of those things. Things will tend to fall into patterns, and those patterns inherently say something. Those patterns inherently have a message. Again, whether you intended them to or not, they just do. Like when everything works the same way all the time, that says something. And it's really hard if you're designing a simulation game to not create those.
When you look at like real dense simulations, I find that it's easier to see that phenomenon, right? Like Civilization, or you can like I often find myself falling in patterns when I play through a round of Civ or something, and I find that defines what that particular version of Civ feels like to me. You know what I mean?
I also
like
find that I, as a player, have tendencies that make it hard for me to break out of those things.
That's what I mean.
Themselves in Civ games, because I, on any micro level, am more likely to make choice A than choice B. No matter what anyone else is more likely to do. And you add those tiny little choices together, and even if you intend for it to be different, a lot of times your big choices are actually outweighed by the tiny little choices that you make around the margins that you're not thinking about because they barely even feel like choices.
Right.
But they still cumulatively added together and can speak louder than your intentional actions.
Yeah.
Which says, I mean, that's how society works too, right? Like you can be like, as individuals, like we make choices to try and be less racist or sexist or whatever. But society in aggregate, like just tons of tiny little things, like perpetuate themselves and add up to much bigger statements than any one person's like good intentions.
Yeah. It's interesting. Should we take a break? Because I have things I want to talk about, but I feel like we should take a break before we...
Sure. Let's do that.
Yeah.
If you found this conversation interesting, you can go back and watch Chris and Nick play Crusader Kings.
God, I've seen, for some reason, some people have found our old Crusader Kings streams recently, and a couple of people have been tweeting about them. If you do actually want to watch hours and hours of Nick and I playing, of Nick and me, I guess, playing Crusader Kings, and having conversations very similar to this one, now that Gabe has pointed out is correctly, go to youtube.com/idle videos, and there's a playlist of our Crusader Kings II stream that follows our Irish dynasty throughout generations.
King Vanaman.
King Vanaman and the Saga of Ragnar.
Yeah. God, I want to play that game again now.
Yeah.
Now that I wanted to talk about Anno for 5 seconds.
5 seconds? Should we still take a break?
Yeah.
It's going to take way more than
It's going to take more than 5 seconds is what I'm saying.
All right.
I thought I figured around
break. Video game. This episode of Idle Thumbs is brought to you by Casper Mattress. These are American-made mattresses at a shockingly fair price.
Yeah, they seem really affordable.
Yeah, they are. And Sean Vanaman has one, and I have slept in it. I have slept in Sean Vanaman's Casper mattress, and it was really comfortable. Sarah and I cat sit for him a couple months ago and slept in his Casper mattress, and it was nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So Casper mattresses they're basically like a combination of latex foam and memory foam. So they have both those things going for them. They come in a hilarious, like weirdly
I've seen this.
Packed,
just a super compacted box
that they will just they just blow up out of.
Yeah.
So you can actually get them shipped to you, and it's not like a nightmare of having an actual mattress-sized thing shipped to your house. That's like $500 for a twin-size mattress. That's where they start. So it is good price for a good American-made mattress. On top of all of that, you can try them for 100 days. And if you're not happy, they will take it back for you. Yep. So anyway, go to casper.com/thumbs. Get $50 off any mattress that you want. Yeah.
Cool.
Casper.com/thumbs. Video game. This podcast is also brought to you by MeUndies.
You said that very authoritatively, Chris.
Well, it's because I know it to be true.
Okay.
Yes. MeUndies, you've heard about them on this podcast before. We like them. We own MeUndies underwear and wear them. I do anyway. And I know,
all of your vault
I know Sean does
do.
as well. Yes. All of my vault dwellers, when they're having fun times in the residential zone.
Yep.
Wear MeUndies.
You're there in the corner handing them out.
Exactly. Yep. MeUndies is a provider of high quality undergarments. That sounds very formal, but underwear, boxers, panties, stuff like that. You can go to MeUndies.com/thumbs, get 20% off your first order and free shipping. So you really have no reason not to try it out. We're big fans of MeUndies. I have really grown in my adult years to appreciate high quality underwear, something that I never would have. Now, like if someone were to give me underwear for like Christmas,
you'd be excited.
I would actually be pretty excited. If it was nice underwear, I would be pretty happy about it.
Yeah.
You can give yourself that gift at MeUndies.com/thumbs, 20% off, free shipping. Thank you, MeUndies.
Yeah. It's so true. That's just you turn 30 and then you get excited about that stuff.
Yep, it's true.
God.
There's something kind of nice about it, though.
It is really nice.
Because you get to
just
take pleasure
feel myself
in things that are actually easy to achieve.
That's true. That is very true, actually. I don't need an E3 to tell me what to be excited about anymore.
Yeah.
Every day is E3 when you got a nice clean pair of underwear, Chris. It's true.
Video game. Are we back?
Sure, we're back.
All right.
We didn't talk about actual Fallout 4 at all.
Yeah, the actual, the game itself, the full game that was announced.
Yeah, I mean,
By the way, on that note, I'm done talking about Fallout Shelter, but
sure.
But it is really cool, I think, that they announced that game.
Oh man, yeah,
like playable right now.
Yeah,
that totally worked on me. I just immediately went to the App Store, searched for it, it popped up, got it on my phone, and started playing. I mean, good job, Bethesda. That was like very well executed.
Yeah, no, they're
Which is hard to do when you're dealing with someone else's platform. It's a pain in the ass to get something to go up at an exact moment on someone else's store.
Well, they have a lot of experience dealing with platform holders and getting things up on time. No, they're very good over there, having worked there for a couple of years. But it was exciting for me to see Fallout 4. I had seen it, super early on when I was working there, I guess I don't have a lot to say about it.
Did you know about Fallout Shelter?
No, I didn't actually. Okay. Well, I knew that they were interested in, doing some kind of second screen / whatever, but I think it was in a pretty nascent stage when I was there.
So anyway, go ahead. Fallout 4, sorry.
But I'm probably as excited as anybody for it. So you didn't see the press conference, right, Chris? You saw very little.
I saw bits.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were a couple of things that surprised me a little bit, although I guess I technically should have known about this. But you can basically now, it's funny, like Todd Howard was on stage and he did the sort of general, like, it's Fallout, here are some concept images, like, it's in Boston, it's a Fallout game, and people were losing their minds. And then he got to the point where he was like, okay, now for the actual exciting things. And, this is like very Bethesda, where they have these major systems that they build onto the sort of base game every year that are the actual like meaty undertakings. And this
you mean like AI and stuff? What are you talking about?
Yeah, or like just engine improvements, or like in this case, it's every object in the world now. Which like I guess in Fallout 3, you could pick up a lot of just sort of you could pick up like trash in the corner and it would go into your inventory and it would just say trash. And like a lot of these things had no use, but now they have this enormous system that. I guess it's sort of like a combination crafting system plus building. So there are like a number of different sites in the world. They're fairly large, it seems. And you can take sort of different items like a globe and this thing or that thing, break them down into their various components, and then like build like a wall or like build a thing that you can kind of, it seems like just snap fairly easily together like a space. So
that's awesome.
It's building on their, the Skyrim like home, what do they call it? I can't remember now. God, I should know this, but like player built spaces, very Minecrafty. It looked cool. Like there were a lot of things like that they sort of threw in there that were fairly surprising to me. But I wanted to say that it seems like this year, just in general, is kind of the year of every game needing some kind of component to it that is along those lines.
Yeah, definitely.
Like even Doom, I was surprised to see has like a I think they call it like Snap Map or something, where you can like very quickly pull together a mod. Bethesda announced like mods for consoles. It seems like. But then in addition to that, like a lot of games came out and with sort of like buildy sort of crafting like editor-y type components. It's crazy. Like it's really interesting to think how far that sort of thing has come just in the last few years. Like there's really no like technical. True. I guess when there's a like multi-billion dollar incentive, like example of how profitable that can be. Yeah, I guess that really kicks people into gear. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, no, I mean, it was exciting to see finally see that game. I don't have much to say about it except that I'm going to play a Fallout game and enjoy it.
Right.
They did a lot of they're updating it quite a bit in the sense of like now there's a full on like dialogue system with options, and what's interesting about their system is that you can actually just walk away from conversations in the middle of them. Like you can also experience them from first and third person. It's sort of like the classic, like do whatever the hell you want. Like in the middle of a conversation, you can pull out a gun and shoot the guy. In the middle of a conversation, you can...
Yeah, that's what you want in a Fallout game.
Yeah, which is nice. Like I was there when they were talking about some of those things, and the thing I was nervous about was like, oh man, some of these choices might feel restrictive, but it's actually just whatever. They just did the Fallout thing and just said like, oh, this shit can just be interrupted and messed with, and that's cool.
That's such a hard thing to do too. I mean, I guess it depends because those games are like working on. I don't want to talk about our game very much, but our game Firewatch, which we announced is coming to PS4 this week. Anyway,
congrats.
Thanks. You can walk away. You can just sort of let conversations die on the vine in that game. It's basically like just writing an entire additional branch for the conversation because
it's a tough story.
The story has to wrap around that in a way that doesn't break.
Right.
So I'm sure that creates also for the Fallout team plenty of additional.
I mean, even in that demo, they were doing the Bethesda thing where like your little. So the game starts. This isn't really a spoiler, but it starts at present day, sort of before the bombs fell, like 1950 or whatever. And they walk around this house, and there's your little robot guy. The sort of like buzzsaw R2D2 dude, and whatever you've already put in your name, and he just says like, hello, Mr. Howard, like in the demo. And they were like, oh, that's not scripted for the demo. Like we just recorded 1,000 lines of VO to account for your name.
What if your name is Asad Qizilbash, the name of the Sony executive who presented through much of the Sony press conference this week? Probably they didn't record Asad Qizilbash.
Probably not.
Greetings, Mr. Qizilbash. I love that name.
It's really good.
Yeah.
There were a lot of good CEO things this week. The EA CEO being the villain in Mirror's Edge, for instance.
Yeah, what the hell was that?
Really strange choice.
I can't tell.
I feel like it must have been in the same way that the Deus Ex guy is just the lead artist on that game. I feel like there's a weird, self-referential,
that is such a different
it's very,
meaning. If it's like, just like our buddy on the development team.
Yeah.
Like how Bill Gardner, who was the designer at Irrational, is the face of Jack in the original BioShock. But that's just like, it's like a funny, haha, we get it because we work on the team.
Yeah.
But like,
haha, you're the villain in our game.
Public boss of us is bad guy in our video game. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. I hope you can kill him.
Man, did you see that they announced that that the new Mirror's Edge game, which is called some Mirror's Edge word, as opposed to Mirror's Edge 2, in the vein of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Mirror's Edge Shelter, I believe it's called.
Right.
Has no guns, or rather there are guns, but you don't ever use any of them. You cannot even pick up a gun.
Yeah, I know.
That's the best.
Sort of what I was
I'm so
referencing.
happy about
I'm really glad that they're, it also seems like a conference this week of a lot of violence, although that might just be me being older.
There's always a lot of violence. When is there ever not a lot of violence?
Yeah, but it just seems like
games, I mean.
I guess maybe it's just the number of games that were announced and just the volume of stuff this week. It just, I felt like inundated by
these days
machine
the
guns.
E3, like the way platform conferences work now, like obviously they announce games that are only on their platforms, but hardly any of what they show is actually only going to be playable on whatever platform whose conference you're watching. All the rest of it is like, it's coming out a little earlier on ours, or like it's not even nothing special. There's just like a little bit of DLC that's different. Mm-hmm. Or even the DLC is just coming out a little bit earlier, but will also be available and everything. It's just excuses to just like associate brands with their consoles, regardless of like what it actually has to do with their console. So it's just this like, because of that, it means all games that are coming out can be showed at these things. It doesn't matter if it's been announced before or not. It doesn't matter what platforms in total it's coming to. It doesn't matter. It just show all the fucking games in here. Bring in the games. Dump truck of games.
Games. 3 games.
3 games. Game. 3 games. There's so many more than 3 games.
Yeah. Yeah, God, I'm glad I'm not a journalist anymore. This would have been an awful year for that.
Sony had like a sizzle reel of like all the games they showed at their conference, and it was so funny because it was like just fucking guns, like swords, magic, guns, swords, magic, and then like just a clip of our game, which is a guy throwing a beer bottle. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Did you see that crazy Media Molecule game, Dreams?
I saw, stupidly, as a lot of people probably know, my exposure to that game is limited to an animated GIF I saw on Twitter.
Okay.
I vaguely kind of heard the pitch.
I have no idea what it is.
I guess that's the thing. I don't really, having even like read the log line, I don't know what that,
It's as was Little Big Planet, it is about creating things as a player in what is presumably a set of like very intuitive, very player-centric creation and editing tools, except that they showed a bunch of different scenes whose just looked like they came from completely different art-directed universes. You know what I mean? Which is like the thing about Little Big Planet that was, that tied it together was that you could make crazy things. You could, do like make computers basically, simple computers in the way that ended up becoming very popular in Minecraft. But everything was kind of tied together by this consistent art direction and sort of material types that were shared. Whereas this game, it just looks like totally different basic building blocks. I wonder what happens when you say start game and you hit go. And then it comes up on the screen.
Mario's face appears.
It actually stretch it.
The dream of Creator 64 has finally come true. Do you remember that game?
No.
Oh man, it was announced before the Nintendo 64. I was so excited for this stupid game that never was real. But I remember the image that must have been released at an E3 or something. And it was just like a T-Rex or whatever, and like having just seen Jurassic Park or something, I was so excited that I could like make a T-Rex. Yeah. Oh, I can make that. I could put that in a game.
Yeah.
And it never got released. I think it was like a hard drive game, like the 64 hard drive. But yeah, maybe it's just that game.
Maybe
maybe it's just Unity. Yeah. Yeah, it's a crazy year. I'm really excited about Anno. God, that is a game.
Yeah, what is it? Anno, like
Anno 2204, I think, or 2214. There's a 4 in there somewhere.
Well, they always add up to 9. We know this.
Oh yeah,
I've previously determined this on Idle Thumbs. I mean, this is actually another thing that Idle Thumbs called technically, because I ran through like all the possibilities of like what remaining Anno years could there be within reason,
right?
You know, like, and unless they made Anno 2007, which I was really pulling for. Oh
man,
there wasn't. You know, they pretty much had to go. They had to go future. They had to go into
Anno
the future.
2007. Now that you know, what's funny, that makes me think that I actually really want a city builder set in like 1982. You know what I mean? Like just something that's just very like.
God, could you imagine New York City in 1976?
Exactly, right?
That would be
like
fascinating.
Or even earlier, right? Like the 30s or something. Like
those would be totally different games.
They would be completely different games. A black and white city builder, New York, Empire State Building, just like halfway built. Fuck. Oh. Anyway.
You want the version of that has like a Paradox sensibility, like Paradox, the developer of like Hearts of Iron, Crusader Kings, games like that, where those games are situated very much in particular historical eras, and they go through them and they sort of postulate, like, given the starting point of this era in history, and given these actual things that they don't just say now go forever. There are things that actually happen that did happen historically. But
World War II begins now. Resources are limited and whatever.
Exactly. But on top of that, you still make micro level choices and in some cases macro level choices and dictate, like possible different ways the world goes and so on. And man, within that kind of philosophy, a New York city simulator, as you say, starting in like, I don't know what, post Great Depression or something. Before World War II.
Yeah, or even earlier, and then going through there. Yeah,
I guess maybe starting Industrial Revolution.
I was going to say, Industrial Revolution, Post-Industrial Revolution, somewhere around
early,
there. Just like
the first skyscrapers, basically.
Yeah. I mean, you want like that, the image of the guy like sitting on the I-beam at 50 stories up. With no harness.
God.
Like,
I want this game so badly.
Yeah, you're just seeing the Brooklyn Bridge just slowly pop into view like that. That's the game you want.
Building the big subway tunnels.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a game that was not announced at E3.
There's a game that that was announced in the E3 of the mind. Another game of the E3 of the mind was at the end of the Sony press conference. Some guy got up there and he was like, "It's the biggest franchise of all time," and then Roman numerals started appearing on the screen, and the way that it ended up being Black Ops 3. But but first one of them, and then it expanded into two of them, and then it became 3. But when it was two of them, just the typeface that they were in, it looked like God Hand. It looked like how the God Hand logo looked.
Man, yeah.
And Jake posted a tweet where he was like, I really thought this was going to be God Hand for a second. And I replied to him with fictional quote, the biggest franchise and the most successful franchise in the world. God Hand. Audience roars, cheers.
Right.
And he was like, yes, that's the press conference that is going on in my mind.
Right.
And so...
Well, though, it's I could halfway plausibly understand why someone might expect something goofy like that because of things like Shenmue 3.
I know!
And just the weird...
Kickstarter.
It's like it got funded in 10 hours.
$2 million?
$2 million in 10 hours or something? Did you watch the video for that?
The Kickstarter video?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Whoa.
I mean, well, number one, really strange that we talked about Shenmue at length on the podcast last week.
I know.
It almost feels like we had insider information. I don't think we did.
We did not.
I definitely didn't.
No. None of us knew anything.
And then, I was excited when I heard about it, not having played 2, but just, whatever. I mean, the original Shenmue.
It's up to 2.8 million, by the way.
Oh my
I'm sure it'll
God.
be higher by the time you hear this podcast.
Wow. But yeah, my memory of the original Shenmue was it's 2000, 2001, fairly high fidelity, cutscene direction for its time, fairly high fidelity, blah, blah, blah. And then I watched the Kickstarter video.
Oof, I know.
I couldn't quite understand. I was watching it with Janelle, my girlfriend, and she has no idea what Shenmue is. And she's like, is this what Shenmue is? Like, what is this? Like, what is this?
Right.
What kind of game is it? Like, she had no idea, like, what it was. Like,
it's a game where when you hop over a rock, it acts as though you're in the fucking Matrix.
What? And what is the deal with, like, the 10-second pauses on people's faces? Like, what a bizarre, surreal,
and
like,
what's the deal
David
with, like,
Lynchian video.
And also, like, a seeming attempt... The voice acting was like a parody of bad anime dubbing voice acting.
Yeah, it felt like a parody. Like, she was like, is this, like, supposed to be, like, funny? Is this supposed to be a joke?
Yeah.
Nope. It's got $3 million in 5 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, it was so weird.
It's really strange.
It was like
I wanted to be excited, and
I know, right?
I wanted to be like, oh man, cool.
I don't even like have any particular nostalgic attachment to Shenmue at all. I mean, my history of Shenmue was described on last week's podcast.
Yeah.
So, suffice to say, I'm not like head over heels for Shenmue. It's cool, but like whatever. But I was still like, it's nice when you see the thing that is nice about it for me potentially is that it was an older design. There's so few people who actually still work in games and still do things on a daily basis who are older than like 40.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are not that many. There are some, very few though. So when you see like an older game creator still trying to do stuff, I always kind of am like, all right, go for it. Like, what the hell was this? What is this thing?
Yeah, I mean...
Can you jump? Yes. And then she says, like, let's go. And he goes, yes. Again, he says it's like the same clip. They just, like, played it again, I think. Or he delivered it in such an identical way that it sounded as though it were the same. Yeah. It was weird, man.
It was really strange. Yeah, I mean, I have to hope the game itself is going to be cool. I assume it will be, but that was not a... I don't even know what to say about it other than it was just absolutely surreal.
It was surreal, I know.
Yeah. I don't know. Video games. I guess they really run the spectrum these days. You've got your HoloLens $1 billion thing.
I know.
Announced alongside.
Every morning. I get this like. I really like this a lot. I think I mentioned it on the podcast once before, but New York Times does a thing where you can sign up for just a daily brief morning email, and it sends you an email at like 3 or 4 a.m. or whatever, just like whenever their newsroom starts, presumably, and it's just like a really nice bullet point list of all of the sort of newsworthy things across politics and culture and like world news and U.S. news and so on, and the arts and so on, and just like 1 or 2 sentences each, link to a story if you want to read more. I really like it. It's a very, very, very nicely put together thing. Anyway, the E3 bullet was like game makers show off their newest headsets at the E3. It was like new 3D headsets. The whole the entire bullet point about E3 was all about virtual reality headsets.
Right.
That's because that's just what our industry is clearly fucking obsessed with right now. To anyone looking in from the outside, 20 years ago, the thing we were obsessed with was like guns and Doom. I mean, it still kind of is, I guess.
3D graphics.
But right. But that was like, there's every few years, there's like a new thing that to the people on the outside looking in who have no connection to it are like, oh, they all seem to be obsessed with this. And the this that it is right now is definitely fucking goofy ass headsets, the goggles that you put on your face.
Yeah.
Look
at those weird guys with their goggles.
Yep. Man, I love. Okay, so our buddy Will Smith, who works for Tested, the website that used to be Giant Bomb affiliated and now is affiliated with the MythBusters guys. Have you seen the classic picture of him making the like shock and awe mouth face while wearing an Oculus Rift?
No.
Oh my God. There's a picture of him. If you just search for Will Smith Oculus, hopefully you don't get the actor Will Smith. I mean, if there's actually a picture of the actor Will Smith wearing a headset, hopefully you do also get that. But the one that I'm referring to is Will Smith, the redhead, wearing an Oculus and making a face that looks like he's in the throes of passion. And that picture, because of that, is just used like anytime there's a story
about the stock image on a headline.
There's a story about like could VR porn be the next big thing for the video game industry?
Right.
Someone always does it in Google image search and grabs that picture of Will Smith going like, oh, but it's also just used everywhere else also. God. So that guy's face has unintentionally become just the mascot, just like the poster child for like white guy, like mind blown face wearing goggles.
It's like that one girl with the headset with the joystick, who was just like, if you Googled like video game excitement or like cool video games or whatever. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't usually Google cool video games.
What? What you? No, I mean,
cracks knuckles, sits down at the computer in the morning, like pours a cup of coffee. All right, internet, here we go. Type cool video games, images, click.
I'll bet you this week a lot of people Googled cool video games.
That's what I guess like a 12-year-old does who knows that E3 is happening.
Yeah.
And is just like really excited
also,
and can't contain how
a
excited
New York Times reporter.
So there's, I need to know cool video games. Yeah, that's true. Also a New York Times reporter. Yeah. That is when those two audiences overlap on the Venn diagram. Their amount of like actionable knowledge about the thing is equal. Right. Their motivation is slightly different. Yeah. But their actual like useful information on this topic.
There's a huge Google search overlap.
Yes.
Exactly. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah, games are cool.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy week. I don't know. I feel like I barely even watched any of it as well. And
I didn't watch much of it either. I watched the Sony thing because we were in it. Steve's game. Tacoma got announced for Xbox One. That's cool.
Yeah, it was a cool trailer.
Yeah. And I watched just like bits and pieces of other things, but there's so much of it. I just can't. Like, I can't watch it all anymore. It's too much. There's just too much. And so much of it's just the same, or is games that we already know about, or games that are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, there's a new Call of Duty game. Like,
there's another Metal Gear Solid. Like, you just kind of go,
what am I going to do with that information?
Yeah.
But, you know. You want to do some reader mail?
Sure.
Okay. Let us see. Andrew Dool.
What's that? That's true. He said go to Anno segment.
Oh, we never talked about ammo. Let's talk about ammo. Sorry. You know what's funny about this? So there was the CG trailer.
Yes.
And then there was the gameplay trailer. Did you watch both of them?
I watched both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I watched the CG one first because I don't care about CG trailers, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this anyway because I love Anno. Anno is this like European city builder franchise that typically the reason I say European is because traditionally the series has focused on European, like generally, feudal or Renaissance era, generic kind of like fictional city creators in a way that is not based on any one like actual real city layout, but tries to draw from like a particular era in European history in a generalized way.
Yeah.
Kind of like it's sort of in between civilization's take on history and like a paradox take on history in the way we described.
Right. It kind of it's fairly open in terms of systems, but it all sort of funnels down into a city design that you create that sort of all still feels generally like something that is plausibly of that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's a huge cathedral in the middle of town, and then
and that's like a big deal.
It's just you inevitably make these things, and it feels very consistent.
Yeah,
despite the fact
and
that
everything
you have a lot of
funnels through resources that are appropriate to the time. So like to build a cathedral, you need complex things like glass, which means you also need sand, and you also need other resources, and those resources they're like you need to manage trade. So a lot of it's about like sort of interdependencies and trade, which is like free trade was starting to become like, or complex trade anyway was starting to become a factor in that era of history. Anyway, so they're traditionally these like sort of European things, but then the most recent game was Anno 2070?
Yeah,
I want to say.
Yeah, which I did not play.
I played it a little bit, and I just was not. This is the thing about the Anno games. So there are two big parts of appeal for me in an Anno game. I suspect, Nick, these will be similar for you. To the extent, I don't know if you're as into that series as I am, but I think probably the things you like about it are very similar. Okay.
17.
1404 or
the
1701?
Most recent Dawn of Discovery, whatever that
was 1404
was rebranded from.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So the things I like about them, and you can tell me if this is different for you, is the combination of one, the sort of clockwork interdependencies that you have to set up. So like economic management in terms of setting up trade and resource development and this complex balance of factors. And then the other thing I enjoy is just the totally lavish aesthetic, like sensory side of it. They're beautiful games. They're really, really beautiful. They're very detailed visually in a way that is, it's not stylized, but it's very lush. It's I just really like looking at these games, and they ship with this nice mode that you can just switch in and out of with a single key press, which is camera mode, which gets rid of all the UI and puts kind of a little tilt shift filter, which is very in vogue these days. And you can just kind of zoom around the map and take screenshots and videos if you like, with yourself. But the game just presents it to you in a very beautiful, picture ready, kind of way. And that's those two things are the combination of that is what I love.
Yep.
And so that is why, unfortunately for me, Anno 2070 was not that appealing, because it had the first part, but it was just kind of this like near future, kind of generically future-y kind of thing. It was still basically just set on Earth, but without any of the like beautiful architecture that you get from like building a medieval Gothic cathedral or these cobblestone streets that you slowly improve. And those things are beautiful. Like as much obviously like squalor as there was in medieval Europe, there were also edifices of incredible beauty, and they really do justice to those things in the Anno games, and I just can't get enough of that stuff. It's just gorgeous. And there wasn't really any of that to me in the kind of just like bland sort of swoopy glass bubble stuff that they had in Anno 2070. And so I watched the CGI trailer for Anno, what is it, 2700?
Maybe it's 2704. It's
2601. It could be. I don't know.
I'll look it up.
Why don't you look it up? And I feel like I should know this, but I can't remember. So I watched the CGI trailer, and the CGI one is set on the moon, right? And if you've listened to this podcast for long enough, you know that
2205.
2205. Okay, there you go. So still adds up to 9.
Yeah.
So if you listen to this podcast long enough, Nick and I are both big Moon fans. And the game is set on the moon. And so I got really excited about that. I'm like, okay, cool. I assume that their architectural sense will still be kind of fairly generically futuristic, but that's okay because you're getting this new thing, which is a totally different ecosystem. And, that will be the thing that is unique and kind of, whereas the Anno 2070 was not that exciting to me because it was just normal Earth, but with less beautiful architecture. So I'm like, what's the point of that? I could be playing normal Earth with very beautiful architecture. So I'll take the version of it that is maybe not like the most shocking depiction of the future, but it's in a totally different environment. That's fine. I'll take that. And then I watched the gameplay trailer, and it started off, and I'm like, oh, what the hell is this? It's just Earth again. They're just reusing all their fucking tiles. Yeah. And I thought the implication of the gameplay trailer was it's on the moon, but we just terraformed the moon to look like Earth now.
Right.
Because that seems like the kind of thing that a game developer on a budget would just do.
Sure.
They would just to be honest, the reason I was worried about that is because, to be totally honest with you, Civilization, the space one.
Oh, Beyond
Earth.
Beyond Earth.
Kind of had that feeling to me, right?
Yeah.
Like you're supposed to be on an an otherworldly place, but it's still kind of just
like a total conversion mod
like Earth,
or something.
Because they reused a lot of their assets. Which, fair enough. I get it. You're on a budget. You're making a PC only game for a particular market. But it was so I saw that in the Anno trailer, and I'm like, oh, that's a bummer. But then they actually take off from Earth and go to the moon, and I'm like, oh fuck, it takes place on Earth and the moon, and the moon looks like the moon. I'm fucking in. I'm in. Fucking in. I'm sold. Oh my god, I'm so happy. I went from such a I went on this big fucking pendulum swing because I saw the CGI trailer and I'm like, fuck yeah, the moon. Yep. This is going to be great. And then I saw
it was the free return trajectory of your interest.
They were bullshitting me in the CGI trailer. They're just doing the lazy moon.
You went all the way
back. It's the real moon. It's doing the moon.
Yep. And that gravity assist just snapshotting right across.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I hadn't even like taken the time to think about the implication of that game and like what it will probably be. But like,
it'll probably play like all the rest of them.
Well, right, but I hadn't.
Except for the part about Earth and Moon at the same time.
Well, that's the thing, which I assume is going to function somewhat. That's the part that I'm thinking is like, oh yeah, no, those are just going to function as two separate like island zones,
right?
That's probably also have their own like spheres of influence within, and their own resources you have to trade between, and then probably some kind of force like in between the Earth and the Moon or something that's like acting as like the pirate force or whatever.
Yeah, or like asteroid mining and stuff perhaps in between.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I'm making shit up right now.
Yep,
but like,
it's the theory of the mind. Chris, it's fine.
But the main way in which the Anno games diverge from reality, well, I guess not diverge from reality. The Anno games are actually not so much like feudal Europe so much as they are a weird kind of version of taking feudal Europe and putting it in a colonial setting. It kind of overlaps with a couple different European periods of history that aren't really like, it's not really quite how things worked, really. There are versions of that, certainly. But I feel like the way they portray it is a little like they're
condensed
things a little bit.
It's just a condensed
it's very
version
condensed,
of history.
Exactly. So so in those games you're generally building on like an archipelago, basically.
Right.
You're generally building on like different islands that have different resources that they're particularly bountiful, with, and you have to trade between those different islands. And so that's why we are postulating that Anno, what is it,
2205.
2205. That's why we're suspecting that might be how the Earth-Moon relationship comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Those islands.
Yeah. It's going to be good, probably.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm so glad. I love seeing... I love that there is still room for stuff like this, Like PC only, very intricate, no like big, crazy, splashy combat thing. I mean, there is combat in those games, but to me, it is like so not... the interesting part of it. I don't even think it's fun, really. I would rather it not exist most of the time.
I mean, that's actually probably the most surprising aspect of that reveal, is that as much as they could have, from a marketing standpoint, played up the combat or whatever component of that game is going to be combat-oriented, they didn't do it at all.
Didn't that happen in the Settlers series, which Ubisoft also owns?
Yes.
These are both owned by Ubisoft. And I feel like the Settlers series moved more and more towards
I was
combat.
actually going to mention Settlers because I don't know if I've ever talked about Anno in this game, but that's the game that feels like a precursor to Anno for me.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
And that's what I liked about Settlers and Settlers 2 was the sort of relaxed style of play. This very like, I'm sort of slowly building up my space and I don't feel very threatened by any. And after a while, I want to say around like 4 or 5, and I didn't follow the series super closely, but my impression of them was that, I would load them up and I would just be getting attacked like nonstop, like in waves, like just constantly people like interfering with my ability to actually just play the city builder aspect. So yeah, I like, it's really strange that is the case with this series, where it clearly has the resources to create this beautiful thing, and yet there's no emphasis on combat whatsoever. It's pretty unique.
It's great.
That's definitely not the case with most strategy games these days.
I know. And this is the thing I'm about to talk about is not in line with what you're saying in terms of lack of combat, but just in the sense of like teams under the aegis of large publishers being able to make stuff that is not the like from the top biggest genres around for an exclusive PC audience. I found it really interesting and cool that XCOM 2 is a PC only game.
Yeah, really interesting.
I love that apparently that market on PC.
I'm sure they did the math on it.
Clearly, right? I mean, they're a big publisher. That's what they do.
Yeah.
I love that apparently that was a big enough market just on that platform to sustain a large publisher-sized marketing campaign and development budget and all that. I'm really excited about that game.
Yeah. I mean, what they said was, looking at the, our engine and the way that we've sort of built it up over the years, for us to port this to console just doesn't make any sense. It'd be very difficult for us to do. But really what that boils down to is, they did the math and said, like, we can survive on PC, and also we won't need to spend X number of dollars to port this thing, and we don't need to because the
console is not enough to
exactly. Yeah. Which is it's fine with me. It seems good in general. So yeah, I
mean, there are some games where put them on as many platforms as possible, because what difference does it make? Like, they have few enough inputs that it's really not a big deal. But And that's not to say that XCOM certainly does not have too many inputs to put on console. Mm-hmm. Not at all. But the thing that makes it, to me, valuable, that game is just on one platform, regardless of what it is. I'm glad it's on PC because that's the platform that I really use. But the thing that makes that valuable is that it is a very UI-centric game. So it's not so much that, like, I think people often get into kind of a trap where they talk about stuff being dumbed down for console or, like console controllers not being sufficient to do a thing. That's true with some kinds of games, but relatively few. There's actually a lot of inputs on a controller. Really, I think what you lose when you spread across multiple platforms, in the cases of games where mainly what you're doing is interacting with visible UI and menus on the screen, which is not all games, right? Shooters are not that way.
Yeah.
Action adventure games are generally not that way. Adventure games are not that way. But strategy games and tactical games are very frequently that way, where mainly what you're doing is interacting with menus and visible UI elements. And it is just a completely different problem to solve that with a controller than it is a mouse and keyboard. It's solvable with both of them, but it's hard to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I guess now that I'm saying this, I'm acknowledging they're still going to probably try and support controllers on PC anyway. So they're still probably going to have to solve that problem. But I hope that the attitude they're taking is, let's really knock this out of the park for mouse and keyboard. Just really, really just like, just completely slam it home there.
Because like they were saying. So that's,
yeah.
Well, I think that stuff translates fairly well to iOS, and I think it was relatively successful on iOS, and I don't know if it was released on Android. I think they said
probably.
It did. I think they said it did surprisingly well for them. So
yeah.
I'm glad that the platform wars or whatever just seem like, to me, almost a thing of the past. Like, certainly that went on this week, right? But I don't feel like it affected me in any real material way.
There was almost nothing. I mean, so, like, I am, I'm really happy that our game is going to be on PS4. A lot of people were asking for that. And I'm very glad to have that, like, try and capture as much of an audience as you can. But, any one platform aside, like, I really myself, just in my own life, I'm kind of a one platform person at this point.
Yeah.
Other than my phone occasionally, right? Like it's like maybe once a month ish, I'll kind of get into a mobile game.
Yeah.
Other than New York Times Crossword, which I continue to play every day. Actually, I want to talk about that for a second after this. But like, but other than those kind of outliers, I really am just like, I've got my computer.
Yeah.
And I've just made peace with stuff that I can't get on my computer. I'm not going to play it.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not angry. I'm not being like, I refuse to play it. I've gotten very, very good at just kind of letting stuff wash by and not worrying about it.
The only thing that's sticking in my craw right now, and this is so stupid, but Rock Band 4 was announced.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoy the Rock Band games quite a bit.
Yeah, I did too.
Presumably that game will be good. Presumably I will want to play it. But I have something like... and they announced that the DLC from the previous games will transfer to Rock Band 4.
Nice, that's great.
But not cross-platform between Xbox 360 and PS4 and vice versa. And so I have probably like close to... I wouldn't even hazard a guess how many hundreds of dollars of money I put into Rock Band DLC. Like, it's really gross because I just really enjoy that game. And I would have to buy an Xbox One and Rock Band 4 in order to transfer that DLC over.
Right.
Which, knowing me,
you will do it
in the future, when I have the expendable money to do that, I will probably do that, and it's going to be really gross. But that's the only thing that's driving me nuts right now. Everything else, I'm just I feel really, it's just a nice time to not have to worry about that stuff as much.
Yep.
I'm sure that will not be the case when VR becomes its own segmented thing. I know, but I'm just saying, like, maybe eventually we'll really care about a couple of those games, and there will be VR exclusive to one particular VR or another.
Right. It is so.
God, did you even see like Starbreeze announce their own VR headset?
What?
Yeah, it's called Star VR. Like,
what?
They're making a Walking Dead game with it. It's crazy. There are so many of these things that are getting announced.
A licensed Walking Dead game?
Yeah.
For a proprietary VR headset?
Yeah. People used it. They said it was interesting. It's just the market is hopefully like I'm really hoping this.
We're in a bubble. We're in a VR bubble.
That's what I'm saying. We're in a bubble, but also like I hope that if it never bursts, that this doesn't further segment things beyond
we're in a metaphorical VR bubble, and we're also in an increasingly literal, actual physical bubble that you will have to purchase and envelop yourself with.
Yeah.
That will put you into a world of fantasy.
Mm-hmm. All of your Anno 2205 citizens will be walking the streets in bubbles.
Yeah. All pregnant. Making me feel terrible.
It's in their underwear, in their bubble.
Yeah.
It's just it's just the end of WALL-E.
One thing they do in the game. Actually, there's two things I want to say about Fallout Shelter. One is unrelated to that, and one is related to that. So, one is that when a bad thing happens, when your base is invaded or infested or on fire or whatever, you like frantically drag people around. It's like, okay, the people with guns and like armor and stuff, I'm going to drag them into the room so they can battle the raiders or whatever. And as soon as the like disaster state ends, everybody goes back to where they were before in such a clean way. The way it works is exactly 100% how I want it to work. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, thank Christ, I thought I was going to have to fucking drag everyone.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, it's always totally seamless in a way that I can't overstate. If it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't have played this game longer than an hour.
Yeah. It does seem really slickly designed.
Yes.
It reminds me of, actually, This War of Mine, which has a similar perspective. And yet, I find in that game, it's actually very, you end up micromanaging each person, like, to a huge degree. And yeah, I wish there was some system in that game that was similar to what you're describing, where people would just kind of go back to what they're doing after you've sort of... made them go do some very specific tasks. It's cool.
So the other thing is, speaking of people being pregnant, people in this game are not, they're pregnant or they're not pregnant. They aren't like barely showing or halfway.
Yeah.
They're just pregnant or
There's
they're
just
instantly...
a baby bubble or
yes,
nothing.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Yes. They're in the bubble. And a thing that I'm relieved that they did that, I'm sure was actually easier for them on the development side, but also like, just thank goodness they did this, is that as soon as someone becomes pregnant, regardless of what clothes they are like logically wearing in terms of benefits and bonuses and stuff, they are depicted as just wearing generic, you're just wearing clothes.
Right.
So that is very good for me because in my base, if you get pregnant, it means that a moment earlier you were in lingerie, basically.
Right.
I am so glad that the game doesn't make me feel like even more of a shit than I already feel like by instantly making me like, yeah, I bet you like this, don't you? And just having just fucking
Jesus
pregnant
Christ.
ladies in underwear walking around my base and making me just feel like the lamest man.
I'm glad that's the case as well, Chris.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks, Bethesda.
Yep. Thanks, Bethesda. So, forgot to mention that.
It's good you got it in there.
Yep. Anyway, you want to do some reader mail?
Sure. Good Anno segment.
So Andrew Duell writes, Robot news? State of the art in AI research. I actually don't know what this email is. Let's find out. Hi, I had the opportunity to finally spend some time talking to a new friend of the family. My wife's best friend remarried last year. They happen to work for one of the top 5 AI laboratories worldwide. Microsoft Research is one of these you're the most likely to have heard of. Interestingly, Google is not in the list. Quote, they only have the data. That's interesting. He stated as a matter of fact that there are now domain-specific AI working at human levels of intelligence in the following fields: natural language, computer vision, and signal processing. This is a completely recent phenomenon, a product of the last 4 years of research followed by a significant breakthrough in the field, which, like any breakthrough, involved independent research toiling in obscurity for about 20 years. The reasons for this are threefold. 1, computational power. 2, availability of data. And 3, 2 or 3 key algorithms that have been developed as a part of this breakthrough. Apparently, Nature, I think referring to the journal, the peer-reviewed journal, had a recent issue on this, known variously as machine learning, deep learning, or AI. These are neural networks running at about 10 layers with much more sophisticated designs than were looked at back when neural networks were first popular. His key field of research is that while they know what works, they don't know why. And his lab is endeavoring to figure this out, or, as he puts it, quote, something bad will happen.
Oh my
Although
God.
this is not strictly robot news, I thought you may want to provide some coverage of the nascent cyber neuron minds among us. Regards, Andrew Dool.
Oh,
yeah, we're fucked, right? I mean, like, we're obviously,
in the last few weeks, I've read a number of articles that basically feel like we are fucked.
Yeah.
Like, verifiably.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because I saw that Alex Garland movie.
Oh, Ex Machina?
Yeah.
Yeah. You haven't talked about that, have you, since you were...
No.
I like that movie a lot.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, we're in trouble. I don't really... I don't know what to make of all this. Because this is a thing where you can't stop.
I don't know.
Right, exactly, right? Like, you can't stop
I guess this is happening. Some of us are just getting smarter than others. I guess I'm just going to be a stupid gorilla and then die. I guess I'm just able to
emotionally manipulate you.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah, there's nothing you can do. And it really does just feel like a slap in the face that all of these like buzzwords from the 90s, like Terminator films, like neural net.
I know, right? It's a
like
real thing.
all that shit that people joked about, like, oh, Skynet's coming out. Yeah, it's a neural net processor. Like, that's how we are actually going to die, to our own stupid like AI meme.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just like, oh, it's so funny. Like, oh, it's really funny. Like 10 years from now, like we could all die to machines. That's fucking hilarious. Let's make all these movies. Oh, it's entertaining. Munch on my popcorn. Bombs fall. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
been nice knowing you guys.
Is that the end of the podcast? Is that the end of the world?
Let's see here. Oh, you know what? Here's an email about Blades, but I'll save that for Jake.
Yeah.
Here, I feel like.
Well, and I played Jurassic World, Lego Jurassic World last week, but I'm going to save that for Jake as well.
Oh yeah. I saw that you were playing that.
I feel like that's a next week discussion.
That's fine. Are you around next week?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Cool. Joe Lubertazzi writes, Dr. Mario Dad Champion.
Oh man.
Hey guys.
Oh man.
Just writing to further comment on dads who play only a single video game. Growing up, my family has always been big into games. I'm now a developer in AAA myself. My sisters and I would play through all the 90s classics like Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Banjo-Kazooie, and Mario together while my parents would sit and watch, never really partaking themselves. On a rare occasion, my dad would pick up the controller. It was usually a puzzle game. I remember him getting really into some home console versions of Tetris, specifically Tetris Plus for the PlayStation, where you have to get the little professor to the bottom of the screen. I don't know this.
Huh.
I would sit and watch him play the game night after night. In retrospect, it's insane how good he was. At some point, I came across a used copy of Dr. Mario 64 from EB Games. I remember being incredibly excited to play as Mario, but then being very disappointed and hating the game when I found out it wasn't like Super Mario 64.
Oh, man. Oh, that's so sad.
I know.
Why is Mario not moving? He's just standing in the corner.
He's just looking at me.
Why's he got a stethoscope on?
My dad, on the other hand, really took to the game. Each night when he came home from work, he would play a few games, and on the weekends he would play for a few hours at least. At one point, I remember taking the game cartridge and hiding it because I was jealous of how much time he was spending with the game. The mind of an 8-year-old is ridiculous.
Oh my God.
During my teenage years, I had my computer in the same room as the Nintendo 64, and I fondly remember often looking over and seeing my dad playing Dr. Mario while I was playing WoW or something else. I would sometimes get up and watch him for a few minutes, entranced by his ability to set up combos 5 moves in advance or escape from certain death.
Wow.
If we needed to go somewhere and my dad was in the middle of a game, my mom would ask him, "What level are you on?" so she could gauge how much longer it would be. A full game took about 30 minutes.
Wow.
The phrase level 9 became a common term in my household, the last level of the game. Over the years, my dad has slowly gotten better and better, to the point where today the hardest difficulty is not enough for him. He has gone through several controllers playing the game. One birthday, I bought him a few refurbished controllers, and he was overjoyed. Today, Dr. Mario is a therapeutic release for him. Without fail, every night after work, he will play a game or two after dinner before going to bed. It's insane to me and awesome that Dr. Mario 64 has been one of the few constants in my life. For Father's Day this year, I've ordered him a tacky 90s Dr. Mario crew neck. I hope he wears it while sitting in his chair in front of the ancient CRT, smashing in Metal Mario's face on the last level. Also, my dad could totally beat Nick's dad at Dr. Mario. Cheers, Joe.
It's true. My dad hasn't played Dr. Mario in years. It's so weird. Like, dads must just all, like Anno games, they all just sort of funnel into...
I'm sorry, look at this Dr. Mario fucking sweatshirt this guy's getting for his dad.
Oh my God. Wow. That looks like something that Wario would wear in a game.
Yeah, it does. Search for Dr. Mario crew neck sweatshirt.
Wow.
And hopefully
that's the thing a dad would wear like while mowing the lawn, and the kid would be so embarrassed.
Yep, that's so true. The kid's friend would come over, and the dad would be like, "Hey, you like video games?
Yeah.
Check this out."
Yeah, it's Dr. Mario. Hey, kids. Yeah, man, Dr. Mario. For my dad now, it's actually weird because, for a number of years he was really into Dr. Mario, and then I guess just the platform that he was playing it on, like, just was not in the house anymore, and so he stopped playing.
What was he playing on? NES?
Yeah, I guess so, or a Game Boy. I guess he was playing the Game Boy version. But now he's obsessed with solitaire, like just the stupid
Windows
solitaire. Windows solitaire.
I played that
and like
for a
my
while.
mom like will catch him like playing solitaire.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because she's not like, she gets upset about it now, and she's not upset because he's like spending time just like, whatever, like doing nothing. It's that it's just such a bad game to her.
Right, yeah.
Like she's just like, if you're gonna play something, play like Skyrim. Why wouldn't you play like a better game, John? Like why are you like, come on, like this gets like a 6 on Metacritic or whatever. Like she's just like holding him to a higher standard. It's really weird.
You know who else just got the equivalent of a 6 in a subjective evaluation? I just loaded up. I just right like 2 seconds ago opened up Fallout Shelter to see how my Fallout Shelter is doing, and I got my first daily report evaluating my progress. 63%, a D.
Oh man,
I was given a D. And I know, I'm sure it's because I haven't been playing the game for a few hours, and so I haven't been able to...
It doesn't tell you what you've done, how you failed specifically?
No.
There's not like
I think it's based on my happiness rating of my characters. But the thing is, like, I know it's because if I had been actually playing the game all throughout us recording this and like, for the hour beforehand, I'm sure that I could have kept it up there because I would have been managing everything.
Right.
I don't understand what
Well, who grades you? That's the question.
Well,
like fictionally.
I think fictionally it is an
robot.
average of your happiness score, maybe. I'm actually not sure. But yeah, it is an AI brain.
It's probably, so it's an AI brain. It's an AI brain saying, come on, Chris.
I could have done this better.
Right, yeah.
Why is this
what I'm thinking
weak
is
bag of flesh in charge of this task?
This is how they train us.
Well,
I hope this podcast ends well. As you just sort of like go back
as I just get sucked back into my fucked up world of enforced procreation.
Yeah. This is how the world ends.
And this podcast.
Yep. Bye.
Find us on the internet at idlethumbs.net/idlethumbs. Send us your email at questions@idlethumbs.net. Thanks for listening for however long we still exist on this planet.
It's really uplifting, guys.
Look at that, strong.
You're pretty dark. I have no counter argument.